So, for the first time, welcome. We will do, again, this session in English because not all of our speakers are actually francophone. They don't all speak French. I see Björn making his eyes a bit bigger. And the theme of this session is Media Labs, which is a topic I've been researching actually since a few years ago when we saw more and more media labs being created around the world. Most of us probably know the MIT Media Lab that one of our speakers is also a part of, that was here earlier. But recently there have been media labs created a bit all around the world in different kinds of institutions, and really all of them very, very different. And so to understand a bit better what that actually means, what that is, a media lab, what they're working on, why that is important, or as the title says, à quoi ça sert un Média Lab, it's a very relevant question. Why actually have a media lab at all? What is the use of that? We'll try to get there throughout these 40 minutes that we have. There's a lot to say. And we have very different media labs here today, or at least representatives of media labs. We have Raphaël, who is with the Centre France Group in Clermont-Ferrand. And they're a regional media group where they have a media lab that's also working with actors that are sort of all around in that region. We have Björn Staschen from the NDR, which is a regional broadcaster in Germany. As you might know, they have a lot of regional broadcasters. Well, the NDR is one of them, based in Hamburg. And they have a media lab, but it's really focused on working with people inside the company, so it's very different from what Raphaël is doing. But they will talk a little bit more about that. Then we have Mathilde Hégron, who is with Ouest Média Lab at Nantes. Which is, again, very different because she doesn't belong to any media organization in particular. She's independent, really, right, as a cluster. But they are working with all the media organizations that are in the region where she's based. And then finally, we have Nicolas Henchoz from the EPFL+ECAL lab in Lausanne, Switzerland. And I said before, a bit jokingly, he doesn't have anything to do with media, but that's not true anymore because as a media lab does, he has a media lab within a design and engineering school, and they used to have very little to do with actual media organizations, but they really moved into that past year. So you can also see how the activities of these labs is constantly changing, which makes it not only very diverse, but also hard to say, okay, this is it, because next year it could be something completely different. So that was sort of an introduction to give you an idea of what it is actually that we're talking about, who we're talking to. I will ask you today to just talk briefly about your lab. We will see also what are they actually doing, what are the things they are working on, and we'll try to get to the question at the end, what is actually the use of a media lab, if we get there, and hopefully there will be some time for questions at the end. So to start, can I all just ask you to briefly say something about your lab? What is it actually, and why is it created?
So about the Media Lab from the group Centre France, it's called the Lab Centre France. It's kind of great stuff. It was created 4 years ago, and the aim was to help the digital transformation. The transformation, digital is a mean, and so the transformation of the group, of the way we make news, we produce, we share news, the way we interact with our audiences, but also the way we changed the culture of the group, the way all the jobs have to work together, and the way we have to open to the ecosystem, to our audiences also, and to start to be more user-centric on the way we make produces of information, if we can call them like this, and the way we have to interact with all these people. So the lab today is, we are just two persons, full-time jobs, but we're working in a project mode, in a project way. So we work with people in the teams, in the HR, in the marketing, in the journalist, in all the teams of the group, and trying to gathering them and to to facilitate the innovation way of doing stuffs. So we are trying to help them to to be proud of their competencies, of what they can make, and to make them understand that innovation is not just the stuff stuck with startups, just you can't never touch, you can never dream of, but just innovation is just finally an easy way to make things and to do things and to invent things in order to grow up and to because it's necessary for us to transform and to change our way of doing things and writing things.
Mathilde, you were not part of a media organization, so I guess you had different motivations for starting the lab. Can you say something about Ouest Média Lab and why it was created?
Yes, Ouest Média Lab is a cluster and an independent media lab. That means that it's not connected with any media group in particular. It's a specificity of our cluster. And it put in 2013, we put in place a roadmap around strategic axes like the research into new business school, the skills development, and the experimentation and the open innovation about digital contents like data journalism, mobile journalism, digital strategies about social media, for example. And we have the particularity too to bring a lot of actors around digital topics, like local media in the region, most of the local media in the region, including Ouest France, the leading French daily, but also regional branches of France 3 and France Bleu, and local television station and radio station, but also content agencies, startups, freelancers, and schools and universities in communication, journalism, web design. All these sectors are concerned with the digital content, and we bring together as a cluster. We have a goal of communication by helping this ecosystem to get stronger and gain visibility. That's our goal.
And that also has something to do with the way it's funded, right?
Sorry?
Sorry. It also has something to do with the way it's funded, right? Because I guess all of you have members?
Yes, we have members. We have 150 members today, professional as well, independent workers, and as well structures. And we run this Media Lab with public subsidies. And in addition to public subsidies, including the subsidies of Nantes Métropole and the region Pays de la Loire, we have the memberships of our member. They have extra services for it, like reduction on our events. We develop a watch for our members about sustainability journalism, content, community engagement, and innovative contents, especially the lens of local news. We look at key debates in local news. So,
Björn, same question.
First of all, thank you for your friendliness with regard to language. That helps. We started off when my boss asked me 3 years ago, can a smartphone do television? So we were technology driven, but we've developed into a unit that is focusing on new means of storytelling, on immersive journalism, on different ways of doing especially current affairs journalism. Not to say news journalism, as I've learned news is dead. We cooperate with universities in Hamburg. We are a place where trainees of my company come to and work with. And we have developed into something that is a change process now for around 250 people in the news department, which we are trying to incorporate in a process of culture change. Which isn't easy, but a great task. And we started off, which is important, as something that wasn't only driven by the journalists, but we've, from the beginning, cooperated with people from the production department. So we've always had people from camera department, from like the edit people in the crew. So they have always been part of News Lab.
Yeah, that's interesting. No, I wanted to briefly follow up on that. Can you say something about the team? So what are the people that are actually working on these things? So who is your lab actually?
Yeah. We are 15 people now. A slightly different group runs the change process now, which I lead as well. But the 15 people in the lab are about half of them are journalists, the other half are camera crew, outside gathering people who run the satellite news gathering trucks and everything, people who come from the infrastructure department who do our streaming service, and they all come into the lab for a week and they go back to their departments for 3 weeks. So we learn from them what their departments discuss, and they can talk about what we do in their departments. So that is a way of trying to widen and scale the scope of innovation.
Is it the same for you, Raphaël?
Actually, we are just 2 full-time jobs in the... It's not working anymore. Sorry, thanks. We are just 2 full-time jobs in the lab, but as when we lead a project, we do it with going and choose and proposing to some people I do it again. When we begin a new project, we propose to people from different teams to join the group and say, would you like to work with us with this subject? We think you have the skills. Do you have the sponsorship and the time to work on it? And then we work on projects like this, small projects or big projects, like the social network, internal social network we built together with collaborators from the group. And so we try this way also to make people get involved in this innovation way of going further.
And then I also asked the question because I know you have a very interesting team, Nicolas, where there are also psychologists, for example. Can you say something about your lab, why it was created, and who actually is working on it? Because I think that's really interesting.
So yes, I have something a bit different because I belong to a university. It's the EPFL, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne, but I'm based in the Art and Design School. So to oversimplify what I could observe as a member of the presidency of EPFL, is that when you have new technology, it's done by usually PhD in a lab, and then if they see that something could bring a help on the market, they start to think about a startup company, and then they have on the campus investors, it grows a bit, and they're looking for the performance of the new algorithm or the new device. And when the time is going, they start to grow, and then guess what? After a certain time, you have the big tenants, the GAFA representative, because they are on this big campus. They buy the company, they change, they define the user experience, they define the business model, and the journalists continue to be the slave of this things to produce the content. And that's, so I oversimplify a bit, but then the deal is done because how this new technology are used is defined. And I have several examples like this. So what I try to do with my lab is when the technology are coming out, is to see now how we can use them in a way that it can serve also the content, not only the business model. Business model is important, but how business model can be done with the content. How we can draw this to create something which is interesting for the end user. We're starting fun technologies. We have been working on augmented reality, immersive stuff, but we also start from issues that are raised by technology. For instance, now we have millions of hours in France. They have 1.4 million hours of digitized audiovisual content. How you bring this back to life? It's not so easy with the immersive stuff. And this is a really core question. And here you can build new stuff. You can involve journalism in a new way. And we want to do it at an early stage so that it create really new market for the journalists. It create new tasks. And it's what I try to do really with the lab. So it's an earlier stage. And we focus on user experience. So to do this, we have designers, but it's interaction designers. It's also product designers. It's a lot of different skills in this creative environment. We have engineers, they are also creative, but they can make the link with the research lab, and they are also there to prototype. We cannot generate ideas just by 3 days of design thinking. We need to understand really what has been done before, to understand the people, the context, and the real context, to make proposition, then to make the prototype and to test it. And so why we have also psychologists in the lab, not just to solve the team issues. It's really to assess what people feel, what do they understand, how they behave in the real environment. And this creates a strong value to assess if it might be sustainable. So we had a lot of things like 3D television and things that cost a lot of things and we're going nowhere at the end. So if you can help to avoid this kind of thing and produce interesting thing at an early stage, we'll be happy. And that's really the work, the positioning. So I think it's complementary to the Media Lab often that are sitting in the media company, which can take over these results and create real a product or things with these results.
And that's really interesting and really nice. And to move on, I would even want to ask you: could you give a specific example of a project that you're doing or you did that actually applies these principles?
So right now we have a very ambitious project. We have been working a lot on how we can revive digitized archive with the Montreux Jazz Festival with different topics. And now we say, okay, it's good. You have one archive. It's interesting, but how we could combine different archives together to create something which is much more important. We have been, for instance, made tests between the Olympic Committee, which has all the archive in the stadium in sports, but Agence France Presse, AFP, has all the news going around the stadium. So if we bring the two together, you create something much more interesting. And then if you combine this with what is going on the social network, together you create totally new digital experience. But there is a big issue, is how you clarify, still have a clarification of where the information is coming from, because a data that is stored long-term about an athlete at the IOC has different value to something that you have on the tweet. So if you don't clarify things, it's a big issue. And the third thing that we want to bring to the project, we want to also engage people in real situation. So we're trying to make physical installation for events. And so the media can be also a social player and have this experience online on the web. So we can create physical experience, immersive experience, and the digital part online.
What is the project?
Now we make a test about a cultural event in Switzerland, and then the goal is to switch it on sports to test with different type of content.
Yeah. Does this resemble to any projects that you're doing, Mathilde?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just want to talk about Hype Labs. In 2013, the team drew inspiration from hackathons and create a Hype Lab. Hype for hybrid and lab for laboratory, and it's a workshop of a couple of days that brings together 100 students in design, communication, journalism, and computer science, and the team mixes disciplines and works on a project proposed by a private media, a local authority, or an association. And the goal is to work on, to imagine and to produce content in 4 days, like during hackathons, digital innovative contents about topic ranging from data journalism or how to valorize archives or interactive storytelling to live coverage of event, for instance. And we always have beautiful stories to tell about this kind of event. We'll give you 2 examples. One project led by the team of Ouest France about the last presidential election in France was selected on one category shortlist of the Data Journalism Awards, a well-known competition organized by the Global Editors Networks. And another good example is a project led by Le Telegram, which received the Innovation Award from the event Presse au Futur. The journalist came with an ambition, mapping the transformation of press during the last decade. And he collected data from the relevant services. He drew inspiration on what was done with the city of Berlin. And he came to Hype Lab, where he met the team of students. In 4 days, they managed to produce and to publish the content online. And this project consolidated the decision of the press group management to create a dedicated data department with a full-time employee. So it's a good story for us.
Why do you like that story so much? Or why does this project make you smile, actually?
Because I think the most important in the Hype Labs is that we bring a methodology focused on the user, and we use design thinking methods, and it's great because the methodology invites every people in the team to think about the project as a user, and everybody is out of its expertise area, and as a result of its comfort zone. For example, a computer scientist can express himself on an editorial dimension, and a journalist can express himself on an interface or user experience. And it's very difficult, this step, because because nobody speaks the same language, but it's important to avoid to reproduce the same old ways of producing content in that which most of the time results in projects that don't go off the beaten track. And we think that this diversity of skill set, experiences increases your creativity. And this kind of experience is a unique experience to think outside the box and to get inspired by other people, students as well as professionals. So we are proud of it.
Yeah, I can understand. It sounds wonderful.
So far, we have run 16 Hive Labs since 2013 about different topics, as you said before.
Then in your case, Björn, what is a project you become happy about, or what makes you especially
I just came back from,
smile?
apart from the change management, which kind of involves many disappointments and some success. But I just came back from the States, and I can relate to presidential election and live stream. We reported on President Trump's election 2 years ago, and we all stood there and were flabbergasted because we had no idea why that happened. And we had small equipment with us, did a live stream for online platforms at a university in Washington, and everyone who was there was flabbergasted, had no idea what had happened. So what we did this time is we flew into a small Midwestern town called Muncie, Indiana. It's a long story to tell you why we went to that city. And we produced a live stream, and that was a first for us. We produced a social live stream that we also showed on television. Normally we do television that we show on online platforms. We did the other way around now, which was important because the format was made for social platforms. So it was interactive, we discussed with users. And what we did is we went to where the people were who could explain why people vote Trump. So we did a live broadcast from somewhere where we would have never done it before because we could never afford it. Now with technology we can, with mobile technology. And we solved the problem because we made it to the people that feel left behind and that don't talk to us anymore. We sat at a very small university in the Midwest. We talked to students who vote Republican. Yes, there are some. Even factory workers who came to the stream, who voted Democratic, who vote Republican now. So we kind of managed to get closer to explaining and understanding why these things happened and why they happened, which was really important for us. And interestingly enough, people on the stream wrote exactly that. How nice that you are somewhere where people explain what's happening. And we missed that before. So that was something that made me happy.
And that could not have happened outside of the lab.
No, it could not have, because, I mean, first of all, technology-driven, so we would not have tested the technology. And strangely enough, our main departments still don't dare to look at the consumer stuff. I don't know why, but they see we can do television with it. It's not as good. It's always different. But then we always say, you know, I think you have to measure what you're doing. If you do primetime television, it has to look like primetime television. But if you do something at 1 o'clock at night, does it have to look like primetime television? If you want to reach the same amount of people that we used to reach 20 years ago, you need to be on more channels. If you want to be on more channels, you need to decide how much money to put on which channel. So you need to kind of scale big and scale small with regard to what you do, and they don't do that. So we needed the lab, and we needed the contact to users to find out what they want.
Raphaël, I see you nodding. You have an example of a project that made you smile
really
and where you really needed the
lab.
It could not have come from anywhere else.
Yeah, actually, I had an event in mind we organized last year. It was a journaux camp. We gathered data journalists from many different French newspapers. And so we had workshop together, sharing experiences, tools we use, sharing datas we had on our regions to make investigation reports, and huge investigation reports. And we shared about our possibility to be as a lobby to authorities to knock on their door and say, hey, you gotta open your data. So we are stronger when we are a whole bench of journalists, even if it's small journalists from local news. We are more powerful if we are numerous. But it made me remember for something we made. It was kind of 2 years ago. We put 4 or 5 journalists in a van, connected van, and we send them on the road and in our rural places, in the mountains, in the Bourbonnais. And so they went on the road, they connected to audience there, and they asked to the people directly, okay, what could you tell us about you? Where do we go? Who do we go to have great stories? What can we tell about you? Tell us what we can tell about you. And so they connected to people like that, and it was an experiment, so it lasted for 5 or 6 days. And so they bounced from people to people who tell them, oh, there is a good story in that place, you should go there. There's my niece making stuff with honey, I don't remember the stuff, but and so they produced content in this local news, mobile local newsroom. And it was such a great experience for them, for the content we produced, because really it was great. We were talking about stories we've never met if we had never done this. You know, from the newsroom in the newspaper, you never say, okay, I'm going to go to this place. Maybe there will be great stories. If you don't go there, you don't know. So our ADN, our reason to be is proximity. So this way of experimented things gave us an opportunity to test this thing, and we did it again for the presidential. So we had this on the great center of France. We have we cover a huge center of France, and so we put the same journalists in a van, and they made the round in whole France, in all our territories, and go to meet people and ask them about the presidential election, and ask them, okay, what is your concern? What are you concerned about? What is your priority? And so we go to people on the market. We announced it in the paper saying, oh, we are going this day we'll be on the market, this day we'll be in the school, this day we'll be at the school. And so people made kilometers to see and to meet journalists, to talk with them about what they had to say and not what we wanted them to say.
But it's really important to understand and to learn that the people that we report on are not just objects of our stories, but they are also actors in research. So we have a program that is aimed at young people. A platform is called Funk, and they do YouTube formats and everything. What they do is, one of the entities there, they have their journalists do, whenever they talk to protagonists, they also have to fill out a questionnaire with regard to what apps have you got on your smartphone, what do you like about news, what don't you like. So they also they always take their protagonists seriously as partners in developing product, which I think is really important, and we forgot about that. We do what journalists think is good.
Yeah.
And that user-centered approach, if I can call it that, is that something that distinguishes the lab and why a lab is so important in media innovation, or is not necessarily that?
You can have lab working on anything. Usually they're working on technology. I would say if it's in a lab, the user center, we must be careful about what we say when it's about user-centric. Either you can have design thinking tools, and we use, in fact, I teach the design thinking course for the EPFL this semester. But what I always say, it's really good, and we use it in the lab, if it's for ideation and if it's for team building. Because you bring idea, like you said, you bring different disciplines together, we can think out of the box, but also out of my knowledge. But then I always said to my students, if at the end of the course, because they have to do a small project, because you saw one user during 3 hours and you have this workshop, you tell me I have a solution, you're out. Because you don't know what happened before, you don't really know him, you don't have any real prototype, you have just cardboard stuff. So it creates a perspective, which is interesting. It can be a starting point for a project, and it's useful. We can reuse it. But don't think that you have a solution that because you met 5 users, you know them. And I think this is really a big issue.
Hypothesis. You have a hypothesis.
Exactly. And then based on this hypothesis, you can build a project and
That's
start to think about. And especially we need also to look back. We work a lot with virtual reality. But it's incredible how many people have incredibly nice ideas, fail, and they just ignore that you have 30 years of research on virtual reality on the automotive industry. And everything, the incoherence between your brain, your eyes, and everything has been documented. But just, it's a cool stuff. We have good, cool ideas in 2 days, and we think that we have a solution. So again, I'm not against this design thing, but for ideation, to start a project, to open a hypothesis, to bring the people together, it's really strong for this. But it's not getting a solution. And here, have to be careful. So when we, as a lab, we look at user-centric, it means that we really spend a lot of time. We work, for instance, with elderly people. I always say the elderly people are the best people to work with if you want to be innovative in digital. And but it takes time to be with them. And then we have the study who can retell you what they really believe in, why they have some difficulties. And we say that there's a lot of wrong belief on this. And then you get really strong opening that you can build for sustainable innovation.
Though
so
I would always say that in the journalism business at the moment, you can't have enough user centricity. So I think the common mistake is that there is no user connection. So I would rather go for more and not say be careful yet. So let the wave get there and then say be careful. But we are still here, I think.
That sort of makes me think of what you said a bit earlier about that you were actually working on a culture change, also much more than non-developing things. Is that one of the main challenges, doing that, or is it something else? Like what is really?
Well, the difficulty with all our labs and with all the labs that I've the privilege to get to know during the last 2-3 years is prolonging and scaling innovation, isn't it? And if you are outside entities, it's easy to innovate. As a startup, it's difficult to sustain. If you're within a company, it's even difficult to innovate because you suffer from the culture around you. So when you innovate and when you've done something that works and you want to get it into everyday life, the most dangerous thing you can do is put that into innovation into existing structures. What you have to do, I think, is merge existing structures into the new. And you have to think about something that, let me introduce a German word, we call Gummimuffe. So Gummimuffe means kind of a rubber joint. If you're in a huge company and you have a small innovation heart, how do you work on the borders of innovation? So let's say your team works with Slack, but outside they mostly work with email. So how do you organize the contact between inside and outside? So you have to build rubber joints that let kind of a system in the middle rotate quicker than a system around it. But you have to think about it because you need the connection, otherwise it'll just get lost. Gummimuffe.
And you managed to do that at some point, right?
Well, I think we sometimes manage to do it and we sometimes don't. So we've introduced our mobile reporter now into a newsroom. So that works, and he is kind of taking more people with him because they kind of adopt to his structure. And we'll have to do that in different parts and more when we build our new newsroom.
I think the issue of sustainability is also a big issue for us when we bring back to the company or our partners the results. I think where we're still having some trouble is to involve people at the early stage to design or think about new ways to extract value from the innovation. Because often we have emerging technology, okay? We have convincing user experience. And when you give it back to the company, as the people in the marketing, in the management, they are really under pressure. So they apply I would say the existing principle to extract the value. And in fact, here you need to also, in an early stage, you get to step back, see how we can rethink the way that we can extract value, and just think about the beginning of Google. it was a PageRank, a technology. It was a fantastic change in terms of user experience, one bar, very simple colors, and the way that they extract value, it was also something totally different. But here for us, we have very difficult time to find a partner to think in an early stage about what could be the new way, totally to rethink, to extract value out of this. Because when you have a way and you have found a way, then also you create money, then it falls over. But I think this is a big topic, and honestly, I'm still fighting to find a solution.
You haven't found one yet.
We don't have honestly partner. We have economical schools, but usually they publish and they make long time, so make kind of classical universities. Then you have business schools, but they are mostly doing continuing education. And we don't find a lot of places where people are really have the time to create new, not only business model, but way to extract the value, but also to understand why it could be sustainable. I mean, create also knowledge on this so that we have something to build on. And this is a big issue.
Really have the time is an issue as well, to really have the time to. Because that is missing often as well. We said that before, right? You innovate, they say it's great, and you say, you know, if you want to prolongate, you know, you need resources, and they say, well, I don't, you know, I'll do everything like I did it before. I don't have resources, so I don't do it. So no, if you want something new with same resources, you have to stop something old.
Yeah, we were talking about that before in terms of choices. Then maybe that would be the last question, and then I'll see if there are questions from the audience. What would be the choice that each of you would make in terms of the lab, for the lab to do, or what should we do working on the future of media and journalism? Because that is sort of what we're talking about today. And it's a very personal question, but I'd just be really curious about it.
Actually, we see the future of our lab like this. We're gonna close the lab, surely. I mean, we're gonna go on the pivot. Is it pivot? Yeah, pivot. Okay. So we're gonna pivot. We're gonna launch an incubator in the coming weeks, and this incubator is gonna be the new vehicle of the innovation process. To make the friction between the two worlds, it's a bit caricatural, but it's like that also, of our old media with the old way to do things and to invent new way of telling stories, and the new way of producing and thinking stuff user-centric of startups and methods and culture. And so for us the aim is to make the friction of these two worlds make emerge innovation and other way to think about new things, new products, new offers, and to make realize to all our people that they have talent and they can work with startups. It's not just a kind of
all of our people, you mean journalists mostly, or everybody
also
in
all
the
the jobs. It's important to mix it all, and it's the diversities, the wellness we have. So we're gonna run like this.
Yeah, bring people together, I think, is really important, and allow people to make mistakes is really important. We are not used to that. If we do an outside broadcast, it has to work. So we have the first way, the second way, the third way. So learn to make mistakes is really important. Learn to kill your goodies is really important. And I think if you have to make the choice, talk to someone who uses your content first. I think that is the main thing that we've forgot about, and I think that's really important.
Just to say one word about our most challenge for us at Ouest Média Lab, we are fully aware that innovation is not just about tools and technology. It's also about mindset and corporate culture, open to experimentation and collaboration between profiles. And by running this Media Lab for 5 years now, we became aware of the importance to identify people in the newsroom who are eager to experiment new contents, but also to trigger enthusiasm within the organization. I mean, we had to convince sometimes team leaders to free their team to come to a high lab, and at the beginning, journalists came when they have a day off or took holidays to come at a high lab. And on the contrary, you may have to convince the content producer sometimes, and in this case, it's important to make them aware of the importance of the potential of the new contents and new technologies, and to help management to identify and take into account their production constraints. So we have to facilitate the dialogue within the organization, and we have to exchange both with the decision makers, but also with the makers, the content producers, to involve everybody in the process. And it's really important for us. And one other thing is, you don't have to innovate just for innovate, for the sake of innovation. Innovation is a permanent process. It's not a hand in itself. So it's important for us to spread a culture of experimentation and collaboration within organization, not just thanks to one-shot experimentations, but thanks to long-term relationship with our members.
Nicolas?
So for this last answer, I will not speak about my lab, but about another initiative. I had the chance to collaborate with the World News Congress for many years with One IFRA, and as I was also a former journalist, and to see that in many places around the world, we have, including in Switzerland, in my campus, we're opening a small cluster. And the thing is that it's very difficult to know what's happening in other places around the world. What are the big trends? Not in our region, because obviously if you want to bring disruptive innovation, you might need to reach a really broad audience to have it adopted. So if we don't know what are the big trends in terms of behavioral change is very difficult. So we need to know what's going around. We need to know how we can act, and don't redo what others are doing, and team up when their project, for instance, innovation project, as soon as possible with the right actors. So it's why we're setting now, especially in sports, because it's a domain where there is a culture of innovation. There's also an audience ready for it. There's some money, and I have the chance to sit in the city where the IOC and 30 international sports federation are. We're just now setting a sports news lab, which is really international, from media from United States, South America, Asia, to see now how I can work with the sports federation, because we're all together content producer, and we want the content to be good for the future and to have real impact with the content. And that's what we want to do. So if people are interested by this initiative, we're ready to understand. But we have already a lot of people going around, so that's going quite well.
I like that as an ending. I understood there's not really time for questions, Baba, no? Maybe one, if there are any. If not, you will hang around for a little bit, I guess, so you can come and ask questions if you have them, and if not, thanks in any case. It was really, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. I always get lost a bit in a conversation, but it was really good. And thank you to you. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you, France Télévisions and Média for the invitation.
Yes, also, merci Baba.
Thank you, Baba.